Discovery, I think you and I are both in agreement, is an extremely important part of the sales process, and one that most salespeople do not spend anywhere near enough time in. So on the board, on the whiteboard, I draw this time chart, and I draw this triangle.
Welcome to the Talking Sales series, and I've got Paul Watts with me. Welcome back, Paul.
Hey, thanks for having me, John.
Hey, your company's called Base over Apex. Strange name for a company. What's behind that?
You know, it's amazing how many people do not ask me that question. They think exactly what you just thought, but they're never curious enough to actually ask. Where did the name come from? So believe it or not, I'm going to tell you the story behind how I came up with the name. And it really, my company used to be called Navigational Sales. And we love that name.
I can understand that. I mean, you talk about keywords and Google and everything else. That would make sense for a search. You know, how do I navigate through my sales? Hey, there's a guy that runs a company called Navigational Sales. Why would you change it to Base over Apex?
They help you to navigate through the sales process. It was brilliant, but the problem was we couldn't get the trademark in the US because of LinkedIn's Sales Navigator. So our trademark lawyer said, you know what, you're going to have to come up with a new name. So we're like, oh, and you know, John, when you're coming up with a name for your company, the hardest thing is coming up with a name and finding a name that somebody else hasn't already registered the URL for. So every time I came up with a name that I liked, I would look, and sure enough, the websites were gone. The websites were gone. Revenue Storm, or, you know, Sales Engine, or anything that I thought was really cool, I would check it and it was gone. And then I came up with the name Sales Reinvented. And when I looked online, that domain was available. And I thought, I can't believe this. So I immediately bought all the domains, and I thought, well, that's it. I've come up with the name for my company. That's great. Sales Reinvented. That's the company. And I went downstairs into my basement, and I turned on the rugby. And as you know, John, I'm a huge rugby fan. I came all the way to Brisbane to watch NRL Magic Round, and that's when you and I got to meet face to face.
You better get that right. It's rugby league, not rugby union. Right?
Yeah, sorry, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so rugby league. And I was sat in my basement. I was watching the NRL, and I was watching a game. I'd had a few beers, and I'm watching the game. And all of a sudden, one of my favorite players, Sam Burgess, put this monster hit on one of the opposition. And the commentator said, "Oh, my word, he's just knocked him base over apex." And I was laughing. I was laughing so hard because he really did. He knocked him face over apex. He knocked him, as we would say in the UK, ass over tea kettle. I was laughing. And then after I finished laughing, I thought, that'd be a really cool name for a company. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with sales, but that'd be a really cool name. So I ran upstairs. I checked on my computer, and sure enough, the URL was available. So I bought it right away. And the following week, I was facilitating a class in Vancouver. So I have these two names now that I want to choose from. So I think, you know what, I'm going to ask the class. I'm going to ask the participants in this class, which they would vote for. It was about 30 people. So at the end of day one, I said, look, I need your help, team. I've got to come up with a new name for my company. And I went through the explanation as to why. And I said, I've got two names. I'm not going to say anything about them. I'm just going to give you the two names. Tell me which one you like. So I gave him the two names, Base over Apex, Sales Reinvented. And of course, the first question that everybody asked was, what does Base over Apex mean? What's the relevancy? So I just said, well, I just really like it. And they were like, well, yeah, it kind of doesn't really mean anything. You know, it doesn't mean anything. So of course, almost everybody said Sales Reinvented. So I immediately get on the phone to my company lawyer, and I say, start the trademark application for Sales Reinvented. So we get to day 3 of the workshop, and we're covering consultative selling, and we've just finished the section on discovery. Now, discovery, I think you and I are both in agreement, is an extremely important part of the sales process, and one that most salespeople do not spend anywhere near enough time in. So on the board, on the whiteboard, I draw this time chart, and I draw this triangle, and I split the triangle in half, and the top part of the triangle, I suggest, is how much time most salespeople spend in discovery, defining the customer's needs. And then the bottom part of the triangle is how much time most salespeople spend trying to secure go forward. And of course, this is where all the objections start to appear, because they don't truly understand the client's needs, challenges, and objectives. So this is where all the problems start to occur. And I call this the time triangle. So I'm saying to the team, what do we need to do with this time triangle? And of course, what I'm asking for them to do is to flip it, to turn it upside down. And of course, everybody's saying, well, you need to turn it upside down, you need to flip it. And then there's a voice at the back of the room, his name was Tristan. And Tristan says, you need to turn it base over apex. And as soon as he said it, I remember the neck hairs on my hat, on the back of my neck stood up, and I'm like, oh, wow. Because for me, this is one of the most important principles in selling. So I'm like, oh, guys, team, I think we need to do another vote. So, of course, we get everybody to vote. And this time, pretty much everybody has gone now and changed their mind for base over apex, with the exception of Tristan. And I said, well, Tristan, you were the one who came up with it. You've not voted. And he says, why do you need to choose? Why don't you call your company base over apex, and why don't you have the tagline, Sales Reinvented? And I said, wow, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So that's where the name comes from, and that's how we arrived at the name. And it specifically came from watching a game of rugby in my basement, but it was a happy coincidence that the name actually matched what I would argue is one of the most important principles in sales.
So the moral of the story is that we need to turn our discovery base over apex. And I totally agree with that. Our whole sales process has to be turned base over apex. You're right. It's one of the biggest. I get so many calls from sales leaders saying, hey, John, I'd like you to come in and look at what we're doing wrong, because our guys aren't closing. They've lost the art to close. And so when I come and analyze it, hey, it's not the close, it's not the negotiations and all that end of the sales process. It's right back. They didn't do an in-depth discovery that would really, first of all, build trust and credibility, and secondly, get the customer through a thinking journey, and you having enough knowledge to help the customer address the challenges and issues and problems they've got and achieve the outcomes they're looking for. If you haven't done that, when you get down to ultimately putting a proposal in and the close, it's not going to happen. So you need to turn it base over apex. I love it.
Fantastic. So that's the story.